My name is Ambrose Vasiliou. I'm not as old as these farts over here. I'm a little younger, even though I don't look it. My story's a little different. I'm maybe closer in age to some of the people here than some of the dinosaurs in the room, but I'm just kidding. But I grew up watching this young man as a kid on television. I grew up watching him run to Batman. I'm 44 years old. I loved cars. I'm Greek, like George was, but again, a reject of Greekness because he's supposed to be in a diner, not in a car. So, more or less, I loved cars, and I was the black sheep of the family, always taking things apart, taking TVs apart, taking apart drills, taking my dad's stuff apart. Well, when I was in first grade, second grade, I would go, have to pick a book out. The book would say George Barris on it. It would be some book that had something to do with George, and I would do a book report on him, and I did a pretty good job because I cared about it. It was something I was interested in, cars, customization, and George. Now, as I got a little older and I could read a little better, it's unbelievable some of the history. Like I could sit here for 5 days and tell you what my experience was. But, like the bed buggy, the outhouse car, why do they exist? They exist because back then kids didn't have iPhones and iPods and iMacs and it wasn't about me. They would go out and play ball. When they were in the house, they would build model cars. So the American model companies like NBC, they would go and they would pay George to make the bed buggy. They would pay George to make the outhouse car and the bathtub buggy and all the other cars that he made, some of the specialty vehicles. So George would make these cars and then kids would run home, see them, have like little cards that they trade or whatnot, and they'd go and build the car themselves. And it taught kids how to do something. First, how to sit still for more than 5 minutes without going nuts. Second, it taught them, like, you trade deals with your friend, engine parts, whatever. Getting off the subject, I know I'm going off on a tangent, I'll go back to George. One morning, about 13 years ago, it's 2 o'clock in the morning in New York. The phone rings. I'm half asleep. It woke me up surprisingly. I'm like, hello? Who's this? He goes, it's George Barris from sunny Hollywood, California. And I'm like, yeah? And I'm Mickey Mouse. Who the hell is this? He says, no, it's George. I said, yeah? And then I woke up a little bit more and I was like, holy crap, it is George Barris. And I was like, yeah, how you doing, George? How can I help you? He goes, listen, I need some work done on the Batmobile, on the car that we tore, and I heard you're the man to do it. I said, so you're telling me between California and Staten Island, New York, you couldn't find anybody to work on the Batmobile? I find it very hard to believe. He goes, nah, you came highly recommended, I heard you care, I heard you're a fan, whatever. So, I go that same day, that was 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night, that Sunday I'm on a plane flying out to California because Wednesday we have a show at Vintage Ford. So I did not sleep for 3 days I didn't sleep. Work. We did the Batmobile, took some stuff out that could cause a fire. It was like they never lit up the jet motor, the kerosene jet engine in the back because 1, the car could catch on fire. 2, it's not very crowd and family friendly. So I stuck a big light in it, and I did this and did that, and got to know George a little bit more. And hanging out at the show, hanging out with him for a week, almost a week straight that week, he was telling me stories about how it was to know Elvis, how it was to know Frank Sinatra. He told me that when Marilyn Monroe died, Frank Sinatra's secretary got her dog, and how Tim Burton might have been with Elizabeth Taylor, but who the hell was it? If James Dean didn't die, that there would be a good chance that him and Elizabeth Taylor would hook up instead. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, wow, this guy knows everything because whether it was Jerry Lewis, whether it was the Rat Pack, whether it was Elvis, that, believe it or not, people would drive to, I said, yo, George, what's this I hear about all these Elvis sightings in between Memphis and Vegas? He goes, Elvis never liked to fly. We built him a Greyhound bus, and people would say, oh, I saw Elvis driving a Greyhound bus with no stickers on it. Believe it or not, you saw Elvis, because he loved to drive trucks, and Elvis liked to drive. And also, too, George had to build us a boatload of Cadillacs for Elvis, because he'd give one to all of his friends. So, how was George as a person? The first time he went out to the Radio Real show, I brought him out there. He came in for a charity that we were having. He didn't come out to New York for about 20 years. And he came out, and I got a little leaflet, how to take care of your George. Do not let him drive. That was number one. Number two, he likes orange juice. Number three, keep him away from the women. Anyway, we'll leave it at that. That part. Forget that. Great guy. But he still always loved his wife, God rest her soul. Anytime he would talk about his wife or his brother, he would just be like, look up at the sky and you'd see that something would happen. He loved his wife very much. He loved, of course, he loves his children very much. And I wish Tony Wood was here with us today, because Tony Wood is a very big instrumental person in taking George everywhere and taking care of him all these years. So, going back to George. So George comes to Staten Island. He stayed at my house. The next day, I'm like, day's starting out, whatever. We got breakfast, we eat breakfast. And I had to drop my daughter off at school, kindergarten. And I'm looking at George, I'm like, hey George, want to talk to a bunch of kids? Yeah, sure. Gets up out of the car, goes, and sits down in front of 30 kindergarten kids. Just like this young fellow over here. Sits down. One has a little suitcase full of little giveaways and things that he doesn't charge for. If you were like this to George, he would sign a ticket box. He didn't care. It wasn't about his name. It was more about he would share and he wanted to see smiles on people's faces. That's what fueled him. That's why he ran around the Radio Real show. That's the reason why he ran around SEMA Las Vegas. You could not keep up with him, man. He would make you out of breath and make you crazy. It was like a pinball all over the place. But George is a person. If he heard Make-A-Wish, he heard breast cancer awareness, he heard anything to do with the charity, before you can even finish talking about the charity, he would say yes. That was what drove him, was the people. To see families together. Not a hobby that separates people and takes them apart. There's plenty of hobbies and distractions that we have these days. Everybody's got a cell phone. How we're going to reproduce is beyond me these days. You see a bunch of kids sitting down at a table, they're all looking at their phones instead of looking at the girls. One day I was out, we're at a restaurant, I'm like, George, should I talk to that guy? He's like, yeah, put some sense in it. Walk over and tap him on the shoulder, hey buddy, you see that? Those are girls over there. Because they're all on your phone. So you sit home and be on your phone. This is, you're alive, you're out there, get out there. So, George, as a person, was a humanitarian first. He loved to see people smile. He loved to see families get together. He loved to experience new things, and he wasn't, the one thing that he showed me, like everybody's like stuck up and has their ego. There was not a drop of ego to this man. Anybody could walk up to him at any time and say, how you doing? And you would never know it was George Barris unless you're a car guy. He would talk to anybody, no matter who it was, and talk him to death just like I'm doing to you poor people. So he would talk to anybody. He was very humble, never had a big head, no matter how much he achieved. He was always down to earth and grounded first. And that's what really separated him from other celebrities that I met. And other people that I met, like people that accomplished nearly what he accomplished on his toenail, didn't accomplish in their lifetime. And their heads can't fit through the door, but here's humble George. He taught me a great deal of humility. He also told me never to give up. It was funny because my home was hit by Sandy. I was hit by a car 8 years ago by a drunk driver. No matter what it was that I had to deal with Sandy, he drew a picture of a boat. We'll build one of these for you and send it to you. Anybody else I would take offense from. But from George I wouldn't. Because I knew it was coming from his heart. Anybody have any questions? I have the Knight Rider car over there. George told me he wanted me to have it. It's a long, interesting story how I got my hands on it. I won't get into that now, but the car does not belong to me. I can't own that car. It belongs to you people. It belongs to history. Just like this Munster coach here. And John always likes to look in the shadows over here. This man is a wonderful man.
There he is.
He turned around, I needed to hit some work done on Kit's hood. He had some blemishes. An old man backed into Kit in a bank. Long story with that. He turned around and fixed Kit in 2 days and helped me out greatly. He brings his coaches out. Let's give a round of applause for John.